Buenas noches, delegados. Ustedes están aquí en un momento tan importante para nuestra unión. That is my best effort so far at Spanish. What I was trying to say was good evening, delegates. You are here at such an important time for our union. But before I begin my formal remarks, let me say something to my parents in front of all of you. I'm not going to get back at them yet. Mom, Dad, I love you both so much. Thank you for what you said here tonight, warts and all. You've always been there for your kids, and you've always been there for each other. As a matter of fact, this past July, they celebrated their 58th wedding anniversary. My mom was an elementary teacher, and she is still a retired member of the Yonkers Federation of Teachers. She instilled in me a love of learning and teaching and caring for others. My dad is a retired CPA. From him, I get the focus on math and logic. They've always advocated for me and supported my education every step of the way. They provided me and my brothers with a secure middle-class upbringing filled with varied experiences and opportunities. But they were deliberate in teaching us that those opportunities were often denied to others through no fault of their own, and that we should never consider our privilege something to be earned. When I struggled to read in first grade, it was my parents working closely with the teachers and staff at Ardsley Public High Schools who got me on the right track, ensuring my academic success right through my college graduation. That formula of working and standing together is what we as educators and unionists practice every day. Thanks again, Dad, Mom, for teaching me an important lesson in solidarity. I also want to acknowledge the person who's kept me grounded for almost 20 years. My soulmate, my love, my wife, Vernell. I'm not exaggerating when I say without her, I would not be able to do this work. Like so many of you with your families, Vernell and our two daughters, Sanaa and Aaliyah, have sacrificed a lot for this labor movement, but that is rarely recognized. So let's give a round of applause for all our families and the roles they play in all of this. And last but certainly not least, it is my privilege and honor to recognize your other FEA officers whose extraordinary efforts have helped to build a Florida Education Association that is as strong as it has ever been. Vice President Carol Goronskis and Secretary Treasurer Nandi Riley, please stand. It is because of them and all of you and the more than 120,000 members across this state that the future of FEA is brighter than ever. I want to do something a little different today as I bring you this FEA State of the Union address. Rather than just listing all of our accomplishments over the past several months, I'd like to invite you to see those accomplishments in the context of a kind of future that is possible because of what we've done together. So indulge me for a few minutes. Let's look at who we are, what we want and need for ourselves, our families, and our students, and what is possible for us to achieve. When I travel around Florida talking to members, most tell me they just want to make enough money so they can comfortably pay their bills and go on vacation every now and then. They want to be able to go to the doctor and get their kids to the doctor without worrying about skyrocketing out-of-pocket copays and premiums. They want to be respected as the professionals they are, without constraints from politicians who are using public education in general and our state's children in particular as a political tool for their own ambition. And they want to be able to retire with dignity. Is that too much to ask? Now imagine a future where all of this comes to be because of members of the FEA have stood together, have organized, and continue to organize like never before. If you think all of this is unimaginable, consider that when DeSantis signed Senate Bill 256 17 months ago, he was certain he was signing our death warrant. He and many others thought unions in Florida were done. But here we stand. Even with the rules changing almost daily, FEA has not lost one single local. In fact, with the 19th union election that PERC conducted yesterday, FEA is now 19-0. Now get this, with an average of 96% of teachers, staff, professors, and graduate assistants voting to keep their union. We are building back our membership. So far, we have over 85% of the membership we had when Senate Bill 256 passed, because FEA members have said they're sticking with their union and they've jumped through whatever hoops were necessary to stay a member. And despite these attempts to finish us off, over the past year, your local unions have remained laser focused on winning at the bargaining table. Across the states, in places like Walton County, where both teachers and support staff have seen record settlements each of the past 2 years. And how about what we together were able to do in last month's primaries? Did you know that we played in and won more school board races than ever before? The fact is, we won or moved to the November runoffs over 75% of our races, which is a lot better than the governor, who lost 50% of his outright. You should also know that in races where the governor and us went head to head, he lost 80% of those races to us. This is a clear sign that voters trust you, and that our work of educating the public on how bad the governor's policies are for Florida has been extremely effective. Now might be a good time to talk about the history of this country and how building something great has never been a one-and-done proposition. I know it's been pretty scary lately, watching rich and well-connected individuals and organizations trying to chip away at the middle class, and watching them trying to destroy public education, the very institutions that give everyone a chance, even the poorest Americans, to improve their lot in life. But it's important to remember that this tension, this battle between the wealthy and powerful and the rest of us, has always been part of the story of our nation. For instance, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, a handful of ultra-wealthy families decided that they would become wealthier still by exploiting workers who had no rights except for the right to work themselves into an early grave, often leaving their young children to work or starve. And by the way, these robber barons, as they were called, had almost complete control over the most influential politicians who effectively looked the other way or rewrote laws in order to exploit workers. But ever so slowly and ever so deliberately, ordinary people started coming together, risking their jobs and sometimes their lives to ensure a better, fairer world for themselves and their families. Slowly but surely, the hard work of unionizing brought shorter workdays, pensions, fairer wages, and an end to child labor. Eventually, a middle class was built, no longer relegating a family to generational poverty. And as unions became stronger, so did workers' ability to buy a house, support their families, and take vacations. But here's the lesson about progress never being a one-and-done proposition. During that same time that workers were organizing and improving their future, those people and institutions who once had concentrated wealth and influence were determined to one day get it all back. What transpired is that over the past several decades, just as slowly and deliberately as was the work of building the labor movement, the tide began to turn against us. And almost unnoticeable at first, it became harder and harder for those of us not in the middle class to get there, and for those of us in the middle class to stay there. And it's no accident that at the same time, certain politicians started to come after our public schools and institutions of higher learning, because it's a lot easier to pull the wool over people's eyes when they are denied a proper and fully funded public education. When you think about it, it's what makes what we've been able to accomplish here in Florida lately, extraordinary organizing gains, winning in the primaries, winning perk elections, so important. And it's what we must do moving forward, getting out the vote in November and continuing to invite every public education employee to join us in this fight, so critical. We are making history once again and turning that tide. And if history has taught us anything, it's that we must stay vigilant. That is why we have set the goal of increasing FEA membership to the highest level ever, 150,000 members by the end of December. To that end, we are also adding back a new local, bringing back the Jefferson County Education Association, a union that was lost about 7 years ago when the state of Florida forced Jefferson County schools to go all charter. Well, that charter experiment failed. And today, public schools in Jefferson are back under the control of the public. And we have a new union there. Please join me in welcoming the president of the Jefferson County Education Association, Jennifer Redfern. Jennifer, please stand. But we're not stopping there. We're also working to add new units in Volusia, Citrus, Collier, and Glades counties as we bring in locals of other unions that have been temporarily left without a voice due to the implementation of Senate Bill 256. And more will be added, because we must stand united in this labor movement. When one union is struggling, another should assist. That's solidarity. But there will always be attempts to divide us and divert our attention. For instance, I'm going to say something pretty radical. Our state, our country, is not in the middle of a culture war as many seem to think. Consider that this is just another manufactured problem to sow distrust among decent, hardworking people. Americans have always been diverse in their thinking, their ancestry, their geography, their choice of foods, their religious affiliations, their languages, even their accents. I don't have one, by the way, but I don't think we're in the middle of a culture war. Brothers and sisters, we are once again in the middle of a full-fledged power struggle. There are three kinds of power. There is money power. The billionaires like the Koch brothers, Betsy DeVos, Elon Musk, AKA the Rockefellers of our present time, they hold this kind of power. They can buy themselves anything and buy their way out of anything. There's positional power. Principals, superintendents, school board members, boards of trustees, college and university presidents, the governor, and state lawmakers. Because of their position, they can pass laws, rules, and policies that impact us every day. And what's interesting here, and what we've seen before, is how money power can also buy the people in positional power. We saw that with Senate Bill 256, when the money power, the billionaires' organization called the Freedom Foundation, sat in the governor's office and wrote that anti-educator, anti-freedom legislation, then directed all the elected officials to pass it, despite the fact that not one legislator would even speak in favor of it. And this gang continues to wield the power across the state, like in Miami, where they are spending millions in an attempt to try to take down the United Teachers of Dade. But understand this, they won't succeed. That's because of the great work of the members of the United Teachers of Dade, led by President Carla Hernandez-Matz. Which leads us to our third and most potent type of power, the power of the people. Throughout history, we've seen great examples of the people power overcoming positional power and money power. Like with the Boston Tea Party, the Seneca Falls Convention, the Pullman strike, the GM sit-down strike, the Montgomery bus boycott, the March on Washington, and even closer home, when on the 19th of February, 1968, over 27,000 teachers and administrators right here in Florida handed in their resignation letters and walked out. These are just a few examples of people coming together, risking much, but exercising their collective power and transforming the future of our great nation. Exerting people power usually happens when folks are pushed too far. Then they mobilize and organize and ultimately realize the power that they have. The truly great news is that because of the people power of the Florida educators back in 1968, we've already got our organizational structure in place. It's our union. So, what do we do next? In November, We will beat back an attempt to politicize Florida's public schools when Florida's voters vote down Amendment 1, an attempt to make school board elections partisan. We will win the remaining 12 school board elections, 2 of which go head-to-head with the governor. We will pass every single referendum for salaries. And we will break the supermajority in the Florida legislature, bringing back a small balance of power in Tallahassee. This is our main mission, and we will win. But as we head out of here tomorrow and decide if each day we're going to work towards these goals or sit on the sidelines, I want to share with you, so we can all be clear to ourselves and with those we talk to, the difference between being political and partisan. Policies are developed and implemented in a process driven by politics. Being political means we are engaging in our own destiny and making our voices heard in an effort to get good policy passed. Remember that people power can overcome positional power and money power when we stand united and we vote for issues that are good for us, our families, and our schools. Partisanship, on the other hand, means picking one party over another and simply voting on whether someone has a D or an R after their name. We know that political parties always want us to vote straight party line. And we know that some politicians want to keep us divided along party lines so that we fight amongst ourselves while they keep hoarding all the money and power. But we, that is right. But we are working people who are in the business of public education, not partisanship. I am encouraging you to look at the issues and where each candidate stands on those issues. Look at their platforms, listen to what they say, and check their history and voting record. Do they support you being paid a fair wage, or do they want to work to keep your wages low? Do they want you to be able to go to the doctor without paying an arm and a leg, or are they beholden to corporate insurance companies? Do they want you to be able to retire with dignity by supporting pension improvements and protecting Social Security and Medicare, or do they push to close pensions and cut Social Security and Medicare benefits? I know that some of you have strong political beliefs on various issues that are not the issues I mentioned here. But I want you to consider 2 things. First, this is a public education union, and public education and union working family issues are the issues that we address here. Second, please consider that some politicians on both sides of the aisle use the other issues as a way to divide us and distract us. How you and all FEA members vote is a personal decision. We need to remember that and respect that while still providing information on the issues that are central to our work. Now, allow me to take just a few minutes to talk about 2 federal races that are extremely important: the race for U.S. Senate and the race for president. In the U.S. Senate race here in Florida, the current Senator Rick Scott has proposed ending, hold on. Let's not do that. We just talked about respecting everyone. So let's do that. Let's do that. But Rick Scott has proposed ending Social Security and Medicare. When he was governor, he implemented a 3% tax on our pension, which jeopardized retirement security for not just us, but all public employees. When he was governor, he began the process of reducing our pay and limiting the hope of any real pay increases. When he was governor, he took away job security and began the attack on your right to join a union and freely bargain through that union. His opponent is Debbie McCarcel-Powell. Hold on. When she was in Congress, she made it clear that she would protect Social Security and Medicare. She supported union workers, has walked a picket line, and voted repeatedly with educators. In fact, during her time in Congress, she had a 100% voting record with labor and public education. In the race for President of the United States, the current Vice President, Kamala Harris, is running against former President Donald Trump. As Vice President, Kamala Harris has been part of an administration that stood up for public education and the people who work in our public schools and on our college and university campuses. She has consistently stood with unions over the course of her career. In fact, this administration is considered one of the most pro-worker, pro-union administrations in the history of the United States, consistently making the case that unions built the middle class because we did. Harris headed the first ever White House task force on labor. She made it clear that she fully supports public education and chose a public school teacher, Tim Walz, to be her running mate. Kamala Harris has plans to hold grocery store corporations accountable for raking in record profits on the backs of customers. That's us. And she has a plan for a permanent tax cut for the middle class and a plan for reducing the cost of health care. And she wants to unite rather than divide. Former President Trump is also running for president. Throughout his term as president, he stood against public education. He appointed a billionaire non-educator, Betsy DeVos, as Secretary of Education. No, again, let's be respectful. Betsy, this is about looking at the facts, guys. That's what we're trying to do. Betsy DeVos has a long record of speaking against public schools. While Secretary of Education, she diverted public school dollars to her corporate friends and to religious schools through vouchers and charters. Also, during the Trump administration, DeVos blocked student debt relief for thousands of educators who qualified under the federal program she oversaw. This was exposed by an AFT lawsuit against her in July of 2019. President Trump has consistently stood in opposition of unions, like when he refused to back new overtime rules that were put in place by President Obama in 2016, and just last month, when he stated in an interview with Elon Musk, quote, "They go out on strike and you say, that's okay, you're all gone," end quote. He sided with corporations in 2017 with his massive, permanent corporate tax cut. That same plan only provided temporary tax cuts that were small to the middle class, which expire at the end of 2025. In 2017, Trump worked to repeal the Affordable Care Act, a law that, among other things, requires a cap on out-of-pocket costs that insurance companies can charge. These caps save many working people from bankruptcy. Thankfully, his effort to kill the Affordable Care Act failed when Senator John McCain cast the deciding vote to keep the act in place. Again, I want to remind all of you and all of those that you talk to that how you vote is a personal decision. However, based on the issues that affect working families and public education, the Florida Education Association stands with our nationals and the American labor movement in recommending Kamala Harris for president and Debbie McCarcel-Powell for United States Senate. I want to close by coming back to that vision where we have fully embraced our collective people power. have done all we can to educate ourselves and our coworkers on the upcoming election, and have stood shoulder to shoulder with each other, not permitting the very differences that make this such a great country to divide us from each other. A future where we behave an awful lot like our union brothers and sisters of the past, the ones who risked everything to make a better world. In just a dozen weeks from now, I want you to imagine yourself heading home for winter break, recalling what together we managed to accomplish. We won more school board elections than ever before. We broke the supermajority in Tallahassee. We elected a new president and a new U.S. senator who will look out for us. And we grew the Florida Education Association to over 150,000 members. And just for a little fun, imagine the look on the governor's face. You know, the guy who thought he'd killed us, as he prepares for the start of the 2025 legislative session, knowing that the most powerful FEA in history is watching his every move. Imagine us demonstrating that the power of the people when we act can overcome the power of money and the power of position. Together, we can secure an enormous power for FEA members across this state. We can secure power for every student, and we can use that power to fight for a better life for all of us. Yes, we can. Sí se puede.